Joy Wisdom Trust is my brainchild, if you like, of my experience of over 20 years and looking at maternal health, maternity, miscarriage, abuse, traumas from birth, etc. I've put this together to help on a much, much bigger platform to bring awareness, education, helping people on a one-to-one basis with therapy, but also offering programs that incorporate both. So I have a wealth of experience and professional knowledge to share with a structure of solutions that work, lived experience and bountiful professional knowledge into JWT, approaches improving women and children's parental, mental, emotional health, and bigger picture concerns. And it's time we looked at resolving rather than managing. Everything I look at is managing, and actually, why don't we just deal with the cause and get on with it? So ADHD is recognized as a child behavior issue. However, it does not go away just because the child grows into a teen or adult. And it's estimated that 2.6 million people in the UK have ADHD, 694,000 children all suffer with ADHD. And the childhood incidence rate is 5% and an adult 3 to 4%, growing. As most people are aware, one of the main symptoms of ADHD is overactive behavior, hyperactivity. But in addition, sufferers are also apt to behave impulsively and have difficulty playing and maintaining attention. In 2007, the NHS suggested that ADHD occurred in approximately 5% of school-aged children and 2 to 4% of adults. As you can see, that figure has grown. And adults can lead to mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, and symptoms can lead to focus, concentration, and impulsivity problems, lead to feelings of frustration, irritability, low self-esteem, and they can also feel very isolated, detached. Raised in statistics, it's estimated that 10.5 million American adults are living with ADHD, and certainly the biggest numbers come from North America. Recently, a study published in JAMA reported that diagnosis of ADHD in adults is now 4 times that of children, and its prevalence more than doubled between 2007 to 2016, from 43% to 96%. UK recognised ADHD as a valid condition in 2000. A child with ADHD struggles to process information. It is very much affected from the frontal cortex. Concentration is fleeting, so having to sit for any length of time is a challenge. They fidget and want to move to other things. Just as feeling of boredom, they need new things to keep their attention. Why TV, games, and interests them, and children with ADHD enjoy the stimulus of TV and video games because it's fast moving, it keeps their attention. Often children with ADHD like type of games which involve fighting or display aggressive behavior or cartoons with quick action and changing pictures. The format is fast moving and repeatedly moves backwards and forwards. Modern children's TV programs repeat information back and forth, and this all started in the US. Program lengths are reduced with sections between adverts and much shorter than the UK. The long spaces between the story section and continually breaking for adverts. Unfortunately, these are ways of keeping concentration spans short. The brain does not learn or develop longer concentration spans when being brainwashed by games, TVs, etc. It stimulates them too much. Addiction to the above format creates further dysfunction. Eyes can be affected, short-sightedness and spatial awareness can be restricted factors from watching screens, and long-term damage from screens is still unknown, although we are getting a lot of glimpses of that, especially around eyes and the spatial awareness and the retina, bigger picture looking. Family life is restricted with ADHD. Any child can suffer, and those affected often miss out on school activities and hobbies with their lives restricted by behavior. A knock-on effect is felt throughout the family with a wider impact upon siblings. The most stressful times can be in the morning before the drugs have had chance to kick in, and in the early evening when the effects are wearing off. So why is it some children have ADHD and others don't? It certainly has many factors in here. The mechanical and formation impacts, the type of birth is a factor, the mother's physical and emotional health while pregnant, birth trauma, and a family history of ADHD, transgenerational and genetic factors. Living with the results of ADHD is underestimated, confusing and exhausting to live, hyperactivity, and for the sufferers and those around them. Different levels of disruptions can be lived. Boys tend to have the extreme levels, while girls live a variation on a theme. Cognitive formation can be impaired, underdeveloped, overstimulated, all at the same time. And the cocktail is very confusing to live and challenging to live with. Aggravates the condition will be certain types of diet, sugar, anything that stimulates will be factors, chocolate, fizzy drinks, etc. Overactive lifestyle, too much going on, is also a factor, and emotionally immature, emotionally overwrought. They are risk takers. They've got no sense of danger, no spatial awareness, little emotional intelligence, and living on survival, and very self-focused. They don't see the world around them as much as we do. There are the symptoms: inattentiveness, overactivity, impulsivity, the concentration, listening, being able to listen and take on board what is being explained to them, not following instructions. Amount of information that they can take on board can be like Swiss cheese. They take in a little bit, but their mind is going 100 miles an hour. They can't focus enough to be able to take it on board when they've got that going on in the background. There is the daydreaming, the forgetting, losing things, not able to finish tasks, and easily bored. Some of these things, and certainly from my experience of working with ADHD, and I've had people sent to me where they want a understanding of ADHD or going to be given a diagnosis of ADHD, and where it isn't ADHD at all. They're bored, and yes, anger can be part of it, but it's not ADHD. And I've had people that have been sent to me, young children that haven't got it at all. And that there can be this over labeling of children where it isn't applicable, but they will be given that label. The restlessness, leaving the seat without permission, talking too much, moving quickly and forcibly. They find it challenging to wait for things. If you've got your mind going 100 miles an hour, you haven't got a minute to sit and wait. They interrupt conversation. They have trouble taking it in turns, difficulty resisting temptation, and blurting out answers before the question is complete. Again, around the risk-taking, they don't have the spatial awareness of danger. Internal systems and mechanical faults are offline and or overused. You can have both sides of the coin, and the results are horrendous for those who it forms within. Living on burnout and PTSD at the same time, which can build from the frustration, anger that can be involved. And parents are overwhelmed. Schools cannot cope with disorders of ADHD. ADHD victims are misunderstood, and although medication is used, it does not cure, only suppresses. And for some, there are contraindicators. In North America, ADHD numbers are the highest in the world, and it's estimated to be 8 to 10% of children, approximately 5 million, and more commonly in boys than girls. And it wasn't recognized in girls until about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. They only concentrated on boys, but of course, it does affect girls too. And not just in childhood, ADHD grows with sufferers into adulthood. And the NHS revealed 70% of children with ADHD will still have problems in their teens, and 70% of those will suffer symptoms as adults. These symptoms often show signs of delayed social skills, signs of disruption in play. Aggressive behavior in children go hand in hand with tantrums when they cannot get things their own way. When treating children and teens with ADHD, they are intelligent. They just cannot concentrate long enough to achieve more in life. However, on the other hand, it may not be ADHD at all. It can be childhood tantrums, exhausted, overtired, frustrated, lack of communication, and behavior. In adults, additional symptoms can be chronic stress, tension, substance abuse, anxiety, eating disorders, disconnected to society, lack of self-esteem, self-worth, forgetful, disorganized, and isolated. It can become a very lonely world with ADHD. The other side of the coin is from the genetics or intergenerational transference. ADHD tends to run in families, and in most cases, it's thought the genes inherited from parents are a significant factor in developing the condition. And research shows that parents and siblings of anyone with ADHD are more likely to have ADHD themselves. Studies have found that trauma occurring in childhood may exacerbate or predict some of the ADHD symptoms. Violence, abuse, and/or neglect can instigate behavior that imitates ADHD. Not necessarily ADHD, it's more from trauma, and symptoms can also develop well into adulthood. And we're going to look at some of the hidden factors around birth and processes. So certainly pregnancy and the mother's health is a big factor here while pregnant. And for some time now, it has been realized that having flu or viruses while pregnant can cause such an extreme immune reaction that there are effects by the baby, even though the virus itself is not thought to cross the placenta. What it does, it raises the temperature of the mother in pregnancy, and this can cause issues in the frontal cortex and in the brain. And this information was first brought to light in 2003, where at Queen Mary's School of Medicine found that the surge of immune chemicals called inflammatory cytokines, which the body produces to counter fevers, may also directly harm the unborn child. And they blamed the high maternal body temperature caused by influenza rather than the virus itself for damaging the unborn child, and other forms of fever can also harm the fetus. Certainly today, there are some thoughts around having flu injection. However, that may also have contraindicated because every woman is different internally. Homeopathy may be able to assist in cases of flu and fever, which would help to bring down that temperature, helping the mother to reduce the internal chemical reaction. One large Finnish research program over a 12-year period studied children from birth until the age of 12, and they concluded mothers who suffered fever during pregnancy had children who tended to be more depressed and were likely to be below average academically. Children who were exposed to fever during pregnancy were 30% more likely to show signs of ADHD, and flu in pregnant women can cause brain damage to unborn babies, and this could be an explanation for their poorer school performance. The true extent of psychological effects of fever during pregnancy might not become apparent until the team has completed more research when the children are older. Previous smaller studies have concluded the exposure of maternity influenza increased a baby's risk of developing more serious conditions such as manic depression, schizophrenia, which tend to appear in late teens. Obviously, there is much more to learn about the birth defects, particularly in the second and third trimester, where the unborn child brain begins to develop rapidly. Certainly when I'm working with children, I do look at, and with JWT, we will look at the woman's history, why she was pregnant, what happened, were there any things like these that were happening? And of course, some of these inflammatory reactions can be helped. Preterm birth is very, very much involved around ADHD. And we have 15 million babies, 1 in 10 births are born prematurely every year. A global project suggests, with the highest risks being in Africa. And in the UK, about 8% of babies are born too soon, and this rate is rising partly due to obesity and later motherhood. And there are nearly 60,000 premature births every year in the UK, 1 in 13 born before 37 weeks. Danish research has found that babies born between 34 and 36 weeks are 70% more likely to develop ADHD. Those born at less than 34 weeks are 3 times more likely. And previous studies have linked ADHD behavior and learning difficulties with low birth weight before, but have only based their results on premature births of 28 weeks or less. These statistics show conclusively that birth does have a part to play in behavioral and learning difficulties in later life. In addition, be noted that some children born prematurely can cut off emotionally and withdraw, and research has shown that these children to be more prone to hyperactivity and with problems at school. So shock and trauma from birth makes the infant anxious and can have influences from interventions such as von 2 and forceps, damaging the temporal and frontal cortex functions and brain systems. And I've been working with children with this for over 2 decades, especially around birth trauma. So the cause and effect is formed in the womb, and formation of frontal cortex imbalances exist with hormonal drives from chemical surges. Baselines are formed from mother's emotional state while pregnant, fear, unhappiness, feeling under-supported while pregnant, overwhelmed, anxious, abuse or cultural pressures are all factors. When women are feeling in this emotional state, unhappiness, etc., they are producing hormones, chemicals, peptides, and this will bombard the infant and will have a baseline on these dominant levels from what they have received. Mother's emotional state can be overwhelmed, full of emotions, causing overstimulation of hormone, chemical, and peptide surges affecting the infant in utero. Logically, automatically, infant will be bombarded with hormonal surges and imbalances from the mother, forming infant's baseline of hormonal abnormalities or imbalances. Coping strategies will be extreme, and adrenal drives and overload. No stop button exists. A mixed cocktail of emotional outcomes are formed for the infant. The fine balance has been interrupted within utero. Mind and emotion, dominant cause and effect features with primal brain and survival dominance within the mother and baby. And there are different levels of ADHD and various outcomes from mild to severe. Anxiety, underlying PTSD and hyperactivity can all be formed in the womb, and the birth trauma from the type of birth received are also factors within ADHD. So ADHD is a frontal cortex issue caused from formation, hormonal, chemical baselines formed from utero. You can have the genetic transgenerational effects here, a mechanical brain overload fault. Dysfunctions in the frontal cortex are dominated by hyperactivity from overactive lifestyle, and hormonal imbalances cause and effect from emotional chaos. Brain pathways overactive performance, and it can feel as if the mind is 100 miles an hour. And I've definitely been able to feel this from a child who has been diagnosed with ADHD. This can be slowed down 100 miles an hour. But there is also the aspect of parents being overactive, and the child doesn't have chance to calm down and to rest and to learn to relax, because there is something happening all of the time. Obviously, you can have the overstimulation of the screens, games, etc., that will add to that. They may not have ADHD, but their lifestyle creates it. In the birth process, through intervention, sutures can become jammed through the birth process, restricting the growth and expansion of the brain and causing imbalances of behavior and thought process. By using small movements, we can ease and adjust the position of the sutures, thereby releasing the restrictions. From my own experience, the changes can be made within a few sessions. Obviously, an older teenager or adult may take 6, 8, or even 10, 12 sessions to achieve the same thing. mainly because of the acute condition and the length of time that the patterns have been there. Other physical symptoms from obstetrical delivery: headaches, earache, mucus, neck and shoulder discomfort, and very much working with a newborn after birth, the restrictions of the womb and being squashed into positions can affect the neck and the shoulders, the hips, and very, very much having a realignment after birth makes all the difference in releasing these positions to the correct position for the infant, and they can avoid and prevent these things. Chronic ear infection affects up to 40% of children under the age of 6 and accounts for a large percentage of visits to doctors and pediatricians. So essentially with 1, 2, or forceps, it can damage the frontal cortex, the temporal lobes, that can cause more proneness towards ADHD and hyperactivity. Sutures also can be a factor here. And it's by releasing those sutures, releasing those restrictions, helping the frontal cortex and the temporal bones to correct themselves, the child that can then have less of that hormonal stimulus, less of those inabilities that have been offline. The head may be severely angulated upon the neck in the birth canal, resulting in threatening situations for the nervous system and causing splintering of tissues with difficulty to relax when born. Muscles and tissue in the neck, shoulders, and head can be affected. Certainly, this excessive back bending of the occipital base of the skull upon the atlas can cause, especially in long births, where it has been a long labor and the head cannot readjust itself when born. It needs assistance, needs help, and it can help enormously. So from a JWT point of view, and having worked with infants and adults with ADHD for over 2 decades, it is the direct brain and hormonal connection that is the key and core of the issue. Direct methods reducing chemical surges, slowing down hyperactivity and emotional response. Reptilian or hindbrain, temporal, frontal cortex, and limbic realignment is the first port of call, reducing the 1,000,000 miles an hour and cause and effect for permanent change. Slowing down, correcting to allow the child or adult to get their lives back. Once this has been done, the child can then return to a sleep pattern. They are also able to relax. And from jumping off the bed to lying on it and falling asleep with solution methods to calm and relax the ADHD sufferer, promoting a slower, more normal pace for themselves and for their mind, because the mind can be on burnout and in chaos. We don't have to live with ongoing management of ADHD. Core reason of mechanical corrections means we can live without it. Helping our women when pregnant to reduce the onslaught of ADHD is a key factor that needs education and awareness. And where birth trauma exists, we must have solutions in place, not just let it happen and continue with contraindicators with long-term disorders such as ADHD, because it's a very challenging situation for them to live with, as well as being around them. JWT offers parental programs for behavior ADHD issues, education, one-to-one therapy options for ADHD of all ages, and a 30-minute free consultation call. As I said, we also look in those programs at functional medicine, vitamins, minerals, lifestyle, diet, and there may be some hair analysis tests that would need to be included. In my book, Pregnancy and Birth, there is a huge chapter on ADHD and the effects from birth, etc. Not ever too late to treat ADHD or ADD. And I found that any age, the right treatment can make the difference. And one concerned mum phoned me after seeing my flyer offering treatments for babies who had suffered from traumatic birth process, and asked if I could help her son, who was 17 years old and had suffered a long and arduous birth process. Throughout his life, he found it difficult to concentrate, and despite the time lapse, his mum wanted to find out a way to help him with his college work. And I worked with him. We had 6 sessions. On the first session, his fingers were going. You didn't want to, moving arms, moving legs, all of those things. Concentration was not there. Second session, he started to relax more. On the third session, he fell asleep. At the end of his 6 sessions, he then went on to sit for an exam, which he hadn't ever been able to do, and passed with flying colours. Now you can see how fast 6 weeks compared to 17 years. Putting things in place much earlier at birth, looking after our women in pregnancy, helps enormously to prevent and avoid, and helping our children to live without ADHD. There are answers. We can live without and prevent it with knowledge and education. We've had a wonderful discussion. Everyone found the webinar very informative, giving them a much, much bigger picture of the cause and effect and how corrections can be made without medication, without the label, helping the child, the adult, to have a happier life, a more contented life, and certainly parents with less worry about their children. Please check out the website, joywisdomtrust.org, just there behind my head. If I can move it, there we are. Do book that free 30-minute discussion for suggestions and helping to change yours and your children's life for the better. I am Joy Wisdom, the founder of Joy Wisdom Trust. Thank you for listening.